Hi, I'm Graham Mary, welcome back. Today we're going to talk about sugar syrup and actually how we go about making it now. There's so many different type of recipes out there, but this is what we actually do, how we go about it. The whole point of why we feed the bees, there's actually a number of different reasons, and it could be everything from survival perspective where you have to get in there because there's just not enough food resources. Secondly, it could be actually used as a stimulant to try and encourage them to grow, and that might be more in the spring. And then there's other times when you want to make the colony grow, when you've got a brand new colony and they literally come onto brand new fresh foundation and you want to expand of sugar syrup. And remember that the sugar that we use and that we recommend using is straight standard white table sugar. That's a pure sucrose based sugar. So do not use raw sugar, brown sugar. That it effectively is not refined enough, so their bees find difficulty in actually digesting it. Now the actual sugar thicknesses and the consistencies we do recommend, if you're getting towards the winter or late autumn and you want to feed the bees, then recommend a 2-part sugar to 1 part water. Now we do that based on volume, not by weight or literally by a cup. So let's say 2 cups of sugar, 1 cup of water. So that is going into the winter. Then effectively coming out of the winter where you may want to stimulate. Now this is on condition. As long as you got an established colony and all the comb is drawn, that means effectively the actual comb is expanded out and they built out all the cells on the physical frames. Then you can go down to 1 part sugar, 1 part water. So it's quite thin. And that simulates effectively a flow, or there's effectively nectar around that bees going to grow. As soon as they appear, there's be a flow, the bees trying to grow, expand and breed, and therefore when it comes to being an actually genuine flow, effectively then they are outgrown and ready to go and take advantage of that situation. The other type of way when you might need it is again maybe something, let's say you got a brand new nuke now established in the spring or around during the summer, and you want to actually get them to literally to expand into grow on brand new foundation. You would use 2 parts sugar to 1 part water. So again, the same sort of consistency as if you would do it for going into the winter. And the last type of scenario where you may want to have it, an emergency feeding. So for example, let's say there's been no food, you're coming towards, let's say midsummer or end of summer, and there's a bit of dearth. And what's happening is there's just no food and resources around. That could be nectar and pollen. So, but from a nectar perspective, you're trying to step in there. Again, you would try to do some emergency feeding. We recommend it again a 2 part sugar to 1 part water. You're not trying to stimulate them now. You're just trying to create survival. So the idea is we're trying to give them 2 parts sugar to 1 part water. So the reason for that 2 parts sugar to 1 part water through all these different solutions is you're trying to get closer to the consistency of honey. Particularly if you're going into winter, if you think about it, the bees are trying to get the nectar. In this case, it could be sugar syrup, could be sucrose-based sugar. They're going to then try and go through a process of adding 2 different enzymes and then try and put it in the cells, then dehydrate it. So the thinner that solution is, the more dehydration you have to actually do to that sugar to try and get it close to that consistency of honey. So that hopefully gives you a bit of an overview of the different type of consistencies of making sugar syrup. But we're going to be making this now in the kitchen to show you how the steps we go about it with a large type of container. You can use various different type of methods, but this is how we go about it. And then at the end of it, we'll obviously show you how we actually add additional type of things to that sugar syrup to give it extra properties, to give us some benefits, and we'll explain why. For this exercise, we're going to be making sugar syrup in a domestic setting, in this case, our little kitchen. It's not the largest kitchen, but it's certainly enough for it's going to be heated by gas. And what we'll be using is this little pot. Now this pot's around about 25 litres in size and capacity. I'm not sure that's in gallons, but we'll put it on the screen. And it's got obviously a lid on it. It's an old pressure pot. Pretty much we're just taking the top pressure pot out. We just need obviously the main container. This is aluminium. It's quite thick. It's got quite a thick base as well, so that helps spread the heat evenly. So we do not want too much heat in the bottom. We want to slowly build that heat upwards, but it's quite a thick wall as well on it. Now, the actual physical ingredients, there's 2 primary ingredients, which is the sugar and the water. We're going to be making, in this case, 2 parts sugar to 1 part water. We are going into the winter period, and also if it's like emergency feeding, against the same recipe, 2 parts sugar, 1 part water. In this case, to do that, we've done this quite a number of times. So we're going to be using 3 of these 3-litre jugs, pretty much full of water. We tend to just get the water straight out the tap, just hot, and so it saves time when it's heating up here. Just 3 of those, that's total 9 litres there. And then from a sugar perspective, it's a standard white table sugar. It's nothing special. Do not use raw sugar. Raw sugar, they can't digest it easily. It's a standard white processed sugar you see on your table. Now this is 3 kilograms in size. We'll be going through 5 of these, so total 15 kilograms of white sugar. So again, 9 litres of water and 15 kilograms of that. Now that's based on a 0.85 roughly grams per litre of sugar. that works out about the equation of around about 2 parts sugar to 1 part water from our formula perspective. And that's how we worked on. All right, let's get to it and see how it all goes together. Right, we're opening these all up. It makes it a bit easier when we come to pouring. Just to make a bit of a spout out of it, which means pour it straight out. Total, that's 12 kilograms, and this is 15 kilograms. There we go. All right, let's get going. There we go. Right, well, we're now going to be adding in the water. So this is a total of 9 litres. And it's much easier because as you pour in the sugar, it starts dissolving straight away. That's a total of 9 litres. Okay, now we're going to start adding the sugar. And when you add the sugar, we don't just simply throw it in, we're trying to spread it out a bit more. So just move around. Shake it all out. Go through all of these. Bring it, and slowly the levels going to rise. Now, the volume on the ratio is the same pretty much if it's 2 to 1, whatever you might do, but you're going to work out from your pot size is exactly how much you can make as a capacity. The other thing to be aware of is the amount of hives you have. If you only got 1 or 2 hives, obviously this is going to be a bit too much for you, so you just have to downsize that as a ratio. And then. Now, sugar syrup by itself will naturally ferment, so there's a little trick we put on the end. So we're going to slow down the fermentation with a little bit of a magic at the end, which I'll show you. Now, I recommend if you're going to make some of this as a reasonable quantity, definitely, we don't recommend making it every single day for your bees. So just make enough for they'll have 2 or 3 sessions, then make another lot. The bees tend to take it, the fresher the better. So, but I do not mean make it every single day fresh. So a few days old is still fine, and it's still fresh enough for the bees. So when we make this, we maybe make enough for about maybe a week worth, and we'll slowly filter it over the week. But then we'll store the excess into somewhere cool, either put in those milk jugs again that you saw earlier, and we'll bring it back and make it nice and fresh later. Right, and the last one, so that's number 4, number 5 now. So notice we still haven't got the flame on, we haven't turned anything on yet, because we have got some. These bags are made of paper. We certainly do not want this catching a light. So again, a bit of safety involved. Again, remove anything away. And now we can give it a bit of stir first, and then we'll turn on. So you'll notice actually it's still quite cloudy. This liquid is not very clear. And particularly when I'm going around now, I'm going to pick up the sugar at the bottom. It tends to obviously settle at the bottom. I'm just going to try and spin around and turn as much as I can. Don't go too fast, so it spills over. I'm just going to mix it together. I'm just mixing it that way. I'm trying to lift it up with the spoon. So I'm trying to lift it and make it a bit misty because I want it all dissolved. If I did this naturally with just straight water and sugar, unlikely you're going to be able to dissolve all that sugar. And this is the reason why we have to heat this up. What we're trying to do, as you increase the heat, the amount of absorption of the water with the sugar does increase. So therefore you find more and more will dissolve into that hotter water. Okay, now just it's now quite misty, you can't see the spoon. So what we want to do is get to that point that it's just about boiling, and what we find that the sugar will emulsify, so therefore the sugar and the water will bond and will then turn from a sugar water mix into actual syrup. Right, let's start it up now. There it goes. Another quick stir again. Last one, a little bit more. I can still feel some granules of the sugar at the bottom, so just try and lift it up again. The great thing is when it gets close to the boiling, as the bubbles start rising, it starts mixing a bit of the sugar syrup together. So it's spinning around, that's great. And we'll close it up now. And we're going to be away. For us, it takes around about, with this sort of volume, and depends on your stovetop, obviously. For us, it's around about 35 minutes. If you're doing a smaller quantity, it will definitely be less than this. So just be aware of it and just keep an eye on it. Where we actually indicated where we find we get a little steam coming to the top of that, that gives indication that we're starting to get it boiling, or close to the boiling point. We can then have a quick look. So what we'll get at the end is when we look at it, hopefully we'll see at the end, is you'll get, rather than a misty look we have now, it'll be almost like glass. It's looking like one of those beautiful seas. You look to the bottom of the ocean, you can see the ground underneath. So this is what we're trying to achieve underneath this. And when it's they're like that, we then got an emulsified solution, like a syrup, rather than a sugar water mix. And that's what we're trying to achieve. Right, let's come back in a few minutes. Right, we're starting to see a little bit of steam coming out the top. That gives us indications it's getting close to that boiling temperature. I'm just going to quickly look and show you inside. As you can see, this is the amazing thing about thermodynamics. And notice how the liquid's actually moving around just simply by the temperatures by itself. So as it's creating its own currents inside and slowly coming up to that boiling point. I'm just going to go a little bit further because when we turn it off, what we want to see is rather this misty look we have for a moment is actually clear glass. But we need to let the bubbles die down a bit more. So it just needs to go a little bit further. And I think we're really at that point. What we're going to start to see now is a slight change. So the bubbles are definitely starting to increase. The temperature's rising a little bit more. Finding that maybe the heat is slightly off the side, or it should be more central. But it shows you the heat is rising up from this side, coming up, and then pushing back this way. And as it's starting to get some bubbles here, you go a little bit more. You just a little sign of bubbles, then we'll literally turn it right off, and we'll hopefully look right through. And this mistiness should hopefully disappear. Bubbles start increasing, bubbles rising. Okay, I think we're close to that point now. So what I'm going to do is start the bubbles quite rapidly now. I'm now going to turn it off, totally off. So literally just got to the boiling point and now turn it off altogether. Let those bubbles settle. Give it maybe a minute or so to settle down because there's lots of very, very small little bubbles coming through. Give that maybe a minute so I can show you. Right, if you can look very carefully, you should now see they're right through to the bottom now, and that's exactly what we're trying to achieve. So we just turned it off, given it a little bit of time to cool down, and let all the bubbles finish bubbling away. And you can now see right through to the bottom of that container. It's like one of those glass, beautiful seas that you're looking right through, crystal clear. And that's what you want to see, so it's nice and it's not misty anymore. You like a sugar water mix. Now we've got actually effectively a emulsified solution of actual pure sugar syrup, and that's what we want. The bees will be able to digest it much more, much easier. This is obviously very, very hot. We now need to let that cool. We could put the lid back on, but we won't. We'll leave that off now until tomorrow because it allows the cool down much quicker and allow the heat to escape because most of the heat is retained on the top. So we want to increase the actual cooling rate, and hopefully by tomorrow morning we'll then be able to move on to the next stage, which is actually adding some extra ingredients, which we'll go through then, and also how we actually decanter it. It's now the next day and it's cooled down. It must have been around about 10 hours overnight to cool down. It's now definitely room temperature. No problems with touching it. Nice and tasty. And there's even a little bit of crystals over the surface, but just to show you what we're trying to achieve is, look, pull that back and see that lovely clear crystal liquid, and that's what we're after. We are now going to be adding in some extra ingredients as it's now cooled down, and because it's a room temperature, any ingredients we put in there are not going to be literally distorted or destroying the properties of that product. And you'll see what I'm going through in a second. Sugar syrup by itself is a great form of carbohydrate, but not necessarily very nutritious. So it hasn't got all those minerals and vitamins that bees usually need as well. So this is why we step in at this point, and we actually then add in an organics solution. In this case, it's called Mineral Bee. It was developed in Sydney by a lovely gentleman called George. The point is that we actually add in about 1% of the actual solution will be this. So it's 10 milliliters per 1 liter is added in there. So I'm going to do that now. Now I know I've done this a few times, so I know pretty much what I'm doing. Now this comes in a range of different sizes. This is a 5 litre size, there's 10. The smaller ones are 250 ml and 1 litres as well. Okay, the next thing we're going to add in is another substance. And now the problem with a sugar syrup solution, particularly when the temperature goes up and down, which it certainly does here in Australia, we find that the actual sugar syrup will ferment. If you leave a sugar syrup for a long time, it will ferment. It goes quite acidy, and if you get close to it, you can sniff it, and it's quite strong, and you can smell the acidy smell of it. Anyway, the point is that the bees will not touch it. It's like drinking acid. We won't drink acid, the same with the bees. So what we're trying to do is slow down that fermentation process to give the bees more time to consume the actual sugar syrup itself. So what we're going to do, in this case, we want to do that, we just add a little splash of apple cider vinegar. The bees tend to like it. So differently, it changes the smell slightly in the actual sugar syrup itself, but the bees tend to like it anyway. So we just tend to use about maybe a couple caps of this, and that's all you seem to need to actually slow down that fermentation process. So everything we do is obviously large scale, so just just need a little bit there, not too much. Maybe I've just done maybe a couple cups of that. That's the second ingredient. The next, which is very rarely I hear about this, is we want to actually add a little bit of color to our sugar syrup. And the question is, why would you do that? If you think about it, if you are putting sugar syrup into honey supers over the winter or into frames, when you look at it, you have no idea whether that sugar syrup, because it looks similar to the color of honey, you have no idea whether that is sugar syrup or honey. And last thing you want to do, let's say coming to the spring and there's some sugar syrup left over, you might be extracting that thinking that's actually honey. So effectively you're extracting sugar syrup potentially in mixing with that honey. And it's effectively got a contamination of honey and sugar syrup. So if you think about it from a color perspective, of most honeys can be from anything from like a very pale orangey red to right through to obviously yellows and golden and oranges, and sometimes the tinges are green. But one color that you don't tend to see in a honey color is blue. So you don't ever see blue honey unless it's contaminated by something else. But the point is generally blue honey doesn't necessarily exist very simply from a natural perspective. So what we're going to be adding is a blue tinge to this sugar syrup. So when we look into the physical cells and when they take it in, we can see two things. It does two things for us. Number one, instantaneously we can see when we're picking up a frame whether we're going to extract or not. If it's got blue cells in it, we assume they've got blue sugar syrup. We will not touch it. That frame will stay and we'll not take that for any form of extraction. But another point that I personally find quite useful when it comes to, let's say, the spring, and let's say there's a nectar flow coming in and there might be some sugar syrup left over. Again, when you start seeing a mixture of the standard golden color type cells in the honey and the blue ones, you can now start giving a bit of an idea of exactly how much did they consume over the winter versus how much they actually starting to bring in the spring. So it can be quite a useful gauge to find out what is coming in, what is going out, how much did they consume over the winter. So it's a little bit of a measuring tool as well. So that blue pigment in the actual sugar syrup actually really helps. Now on the actual color side, there's two ways you can go about it. Yes, you can use standard blue dyes, and I personally don't find there's any major concerns with that, but there is certainly some people. What I'm doing today though is something slightly different, and I was referred to by a couple of people, is adding a natural dye. Now the dye is called, let me get this right, is blue butterfly pea, which is effectively a tea. And what that tea is effectively the petals from the flowers, and you put it into a tea like normally, like you make like normal tea, and it obviously extracts the color and the flavors out of it. It's supposed to be very nutritious for you, but we are using it from the color perspective, and that goes in there. And that's just what we've done today. So what we got in this case, blue butterfly pea. It sometimes comes full blue, sometimes slightly purple, depends on that. And we just simply made a bit of tea, let that cool down. That was done last night. And we're going to pour this in as well. And that should be given more than enough. I'm just going to go and give it a little stir. So I've got 3 ingredients added into what the normal sugar syrup is. So remember, this is 2 parts sugar to 1 part water. It doesn't take too long to mix it all together. And because this is all done in room temperature, all those things such as the sugar syrup, mineral bee, and the apple cider vinegar, if you did put those in before or when it was, let's say, hot, effectively what will happen is burn all that nutrition away. And for the mineral bee perspective, it certainly will destroy some of the vitamins in that. That's not what you want to do. And the apple cider vinegar, you might burn some of that off, so that's what we're not trying to do. So again, it's important you do this at the room temperature. Right, so that's pretty much done. The next step is going to be going about how we decanter it straight out of there. One of the old ways we used to do is get in a container and simply just get a funnel and simply pour it in. Okay, we're going to do something a little different today, which makes it a bit cleaner. It takes a little bit longer, but we'll show you how we go about it. Right, so we have a nice big 25-litre container down here. That's what we're going to be putting into, and obviously the liquid is in there. That is around about 20-25 or so litres in there. Now, as I said before, we used to put this over the sink, we used to have a big funnel, and we used to pour 1 jug at a time, and that worked okay. But to be honest, we've actually sort of done a little tricks or two and using a bit of physics in here. So what we're going to do is use a bit of pipe, okay? And some of you people might get an idea what I'm going to do already, but the point is just a standard bit of piping. And I'm going to put a bit of weight on the end now. Don't tell the other half, but I've just simply got a bit of weight from the kitchen. In this case, a couple of spoons, metal spoons. And I'm going to use elastic band over the end. And what that is simply to do is to weigh that down. So what I'm going to do is put this pipe into the physical pot itself. But I find if I just simply put the pipe in, it tends to float or go halfway. But I want it to go right to the very bottom. So that's what I'm going to do now. So straight over the end, right down to the bottom. This end might be a little extra. And now we've got obviously the other pipe itself. I'll just bring the camera down a little bit. You can put it in there. And it's in there. Now, to get this going, it needs a little suction, and hopefully, we should start seeing it coming down. A little bit of physics, and off it goes. And we're not got perpetual motion now. Pretty much, it's just going to keep going and keep going, and just keep sucking it through. Now we've got a motion going through, and that's going to carry on until we obviously finish. But it's important to get that this is always higher than the container. If you have it the other way around or level, you're not going to get this moving. So it's important that the actual container is below from a height perspective. And obviously you need a bit of a suction to get it going, but also make sure that the actual tube you're putting in is obviously as low as you possibly can, because the last thing you want to do is get finished and it will stop again. So hopefully that helps you. This is obviously just a range of different things we do ourselves. Now you may have ideas, would love to hear what you do from your sugar syrup perspective. If you have ideas how we can improve ourselves, it'd be fantastic to hear, or actually help other people as well. We like to think we're a bit of a community side, so if you can give people some tips, fantastic. If you can please give us a thumbs up, we'd really, really appreciate it. And if you want to see more videos of this and others that we're trying to bring out, then please do subscribe. But anyway, happy beekeeping, everybody.